Ahead on Building Character, an artist's creativity hits overdrive as she converts a forgotten old stable into an imaginative home. In Florida, a makeover turns this former sheriff's office into a stylish and colorful residence. And where cotton was once king, a cotton gin becomes a castle. An old farm building is transformed into an elegant abode. Hi, welcome to Building Character. I'm Brian Ashby. Entering Shelby, North Carolina is like taking a step back in time. Many of the historic buildings there have remained unchanged since the quaint southern city got its start in the 1840s. But recently, an artist moved to town and shook things up a bit when she bought an old livery stable and decided to make it her home. Sally Jacobs can transform a dull, blank canvas into a lively work of art.
I'm an artist, and it's what I'm passionate about, and also wanted for my home to reflect that.
So when Sally first saw a dull, decaying livery stable, she knew she had discovered her most challenging canvas.
I saw this as one large canvas, sculpture, multimedia experience.
Simply put, Sally saw this raw space as her future home. But the small town of Shelby, North Carolina saw things differently, reluctant to issue a residential building permit in a commercial area. After all, this was a place where historically conservative architecture dictated that a bank, courthouse, or home looked like one. It was into such a world that Monroe Bean built his livery stable of 1908. Renting out horses and carriages, the stable was a kind of taxi stand of its time. Over the years, the building fell into neglect. Sally convinced the town that by converting the livery stable, she could revitalize the neighborhood. In 2000, she bought the building from a local resident after finally receiving a residential building permit.
I remember opening the barn doors, pulling them apart, and seeing this amazing space in front of me.
Sally, on a limited budget, faced some daunting challenges with the 4,000 square foot, 14-foot high rectangular space. Part of the roof had collapsed. There was no heat and no insulation.
There were many times I just didn't know if I could get through it all. I really felt as though it was overwhelming.
The livery had no modern electricity or plumbing to speak of. Workmen laying pipe and wires had to chisel through an old foundation underneath the cement floor. Sally preserved the original exposed brick, as well as the ceiling beams. To cover insulation, she hung a new ceiling of old rusted barn roofing.
The height, was a challenge working up high like that.
Original windows were restored, and in bedrooms, they were lowered so people could climb out in an emergency. When designing the floor plan of the house, Sally called on architect Roger Holland.
She had a vision for what the space could be like, which was very unique.
For starters, when walls were framed into the large open space, they stopped short before reaching the ceiling.
I wanted to maintain the height, so hence there are no ceilings inside the rooms.
This hallway runs the length of the house, right down the center. Here, horses cooled down in stalls after working in the Carolina heat.
They were in the center because the currents were able to flow freely, and there was the best draft was right in the center.
Sally's art studio takes up almost half the house. Her private living quarters occupy the neighboring 2,000 square feet. The spaces are connected by this barn door Sally added to honor the building's original occupants. The kitchen is in the center of the home, right off the studio. Where quarter horses once ate, Sally cooked up a creative design. Kitchen cabinets were fashioned out of 15 wood boxes.
It had a little bit of a surprise element, and it wasn't a regular pattern. I like to have something a little off all the time.
Just off the kitchen, you could say the writing's on the wall in Sally's dining room. Here, a giant chalkboard includes words and pictures Sally first jotted in a sketchbook during a trip through Italy.
So I started writing and drawing the actual little sketches of the villages and the towns that I had been traveling to and from.
Inspired by Italian hillside villas, near the front of the house, Sally built a lofted sitting room with a view of the entire stable. From here, you can see beyond the kitchen to the yellow area with the bedrooms. You'll also notice the space is punctuated with odd pitched roofs.
I needed to have closets, so I thought that the closet spaces themselves could actually become like a home, like a small house.
House number 1 is a clothing closet shared by the master and guest bedroom. House number 2 holds air conditioning and mechanicals. In Sally's master bedroom, this colorful headboard was fashioned out of old doors.
And the maple syrup buckets are the reading lights, and then the crown is just when I've had a good day, I turn that on.
A suitcase on table legs doubles as a nightstand, while another in the corner provides extra storage. Sally's floor plan has an eclectic, improvised feel to it, with surprises around every turn. When we come back, a room with real prairie grass, and special visitors tour the makeover. Then later, color and style reshape a former sheriff's office in Florida, ahead on Building Character. Welcome back to Building Character. We return to Shelby, North Carolina, where Sally Jacobs has converted an old livery stable into a colorful and creative home. At first, the transformation raised some eyebrows. But what do some local townsfolk think of the place now? We're about to find out. Sally Jacobs is an artist who on most mornings rolls out of bed, slides open the barn door, and goes right to work in the studio she carved out of a space it took more than 2 years to convert from abandoned livery stable to home.
So as I was working through this, it became like a painting, or it became a piece of art that I had to problem solve and find new function for things that may have typically been used in other ways.
Sally's love for old and recycled things is a thriftiness the old livery stableman would have admired.
I like to take things that have been used for a different purpose and then find new function with them.
Down this hall in the very back of the house, Sally's master bedroom occupies the space where tack was hung. Here, the old iron tub is almost expected, but she added her own simple touch to the handles.
It's just the regular spigots that you use for outdoor hoses to hook up onto.
In lieu of fiberglass or tile, the stable's original brick provides the walls of the adjacent shower. With so many distinct spaces to choose from, one remains a standout.
My favorite room is this rodeo room.
This unique loft space is right next to the kitchen, a few feet off the ground. Hay bales were once piled high here. Now, a perched cowboy hat stands vigilant. The floor comes courtesy of a Blacksburg rodeo show poster, and prairie grass grows in a planter. Sally does have a bit of green space outside, a small garden in the former loading area in the back of the stable.
I love to garden.
Today, Shelby, North Carolina has come to accept, even embrace Sally and her unconventional ways. Local children attend her art workshops. Margaret Fontana is the great-granddaughter of L.Z. Monroe Bean, the man who built the livery stable in 1908.
I cannot believe it's still standing, quite honestly. I think the only alternative at that time would have been to have demolished it. And instead, people came to the rescue, they saved it.
Margaret and her mother, Mary Grace Meganson, seem to find new inspiration in what Sally has done to a forgotten town landmark.
I hope all the heirs, I wish they would come. You know, I think that they would be impressed and be delighted that this legacy has continued.
And perhaps a town that couldn't imagine a home unless it looked like one, now sees its downtown in a whole new light.
There are many, many, many blank canvases around the world, and I think they're just waiting to be tapped and to be, touched.
Next, how the history of this transformed building revolves around the railroad just outside its door. Plus, an Arkansas man moves into the family cotton gin, corrugated steel and all, later on Building Character.